Hello, this is Eddie Barragan. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I'm here to discuss the symptoms and caused by the condition of respiratory acidosis, and also the treatment and the complications and biomechanical mechanisms of the condition as well. Thank you. I look forward to discussing it in more detail. So, what is respiratory acidosis? It is a condition of acid-base imbalance leading to hypoxia or oxygen deprivation, hypoventilation being the lung or the respiratory system's inability to induce breathing at a sustainable rate to provide the body with sufficient oxygen, leading again to a state of oxygen deprivation, also known as hypoxia. Usually it's a failure in which the body is unable to ventilate, so it is very much a much broader cause for the condition to exist. Muscle weakness or hyperreflexia. Additional causes include, respiratory diseases, depression, which can have a sort of psychosomatic effect on our ability to properly think or mentally function, therefore also leading to a deficiency in our breathing apparatus. It can be physical too. There can very much be a physical cause. There can be airway obstructions. It can be a consequence of conditions such as pneumonia. It can be alveolar capillary diffusions, where there is simply, externally not enough atmospheric pressure to allow for breathing to take place, period. So in addition to oxygen deprivation, of course, the inverse of that would be carbon dioxide buildup, which can turn the body into a toxic state. Very dangerous. And the thing about respiratory acidosis is it can be very acute. It can be sudden, usually in the case of a very physical and abrupt change in the body's homeostasis, existence, injury, or atmospheric rise, or within a plane without proper protection, could be caused by failure of the plane, or a number of other things. It can be chronic, again, like mentioned. It can be any number of diseases, or medical, or physical, or even mental conditions that can lead to a prolonged state of hypoxia, and that can absolutely influence the body's ability to properly ventilate and induce oxygen and expel carbon dioxide. So yeah, that's kind of the key takeaway of introducing respiratory acidosis and how it can be caused and exacerbated by a number of other conditions. Now, besides just the physical causes or mental causes or the function or process of it occurring, respiratory acidosis can manifest itself in a number of different and diverse symptoms. It can be fatigue, confusion, anxiety. It can be headache, shortness of breath, which is much more physically obvious and immediate condition. It can even be something as potentially serious as a coma, or again, a lack of oxygen or a state of hypoxia leading to death. That's why it's so very difficult oftentimes for people to truly appreciate or self-diagnose or assess the risk of developing respiratory acidosis, because it could be chronically caused, which can be a very minute change in their physical being and prolonged over a long period of time. So symptoms like that, it can be as mild as just, sweating a bit more, or being a bit more anxious, having an occasional headache, being a bit more tired than usual every now and then. That's why, again, it's these rather seemingly benign or trivial little symptoms that do not manifest themselves in extremely obvious and sudden ways. It can be hard to miss for people who live with the condition to properly, recognize when these changes are happening, or to take sufficient action to prevent anything serious happening when it does happen. So that's why it's always important to keep an eye out for these things, any changes whatsoever, and see a trained medical health professional as quickly as possible. So, as mentioned before, the main underlying cause of respiratory acidosis is having an acid-base imbalance caused by alveolar hypoventilation, inability for the body to properly filter and ventilate itself through its own respiratory system. Normal mechanisms of ventilation, being disturbed, and then, very minute ventilations leading to an inadequate balance to the body's pH levels. That is underlyingly, what the cause is. In terms of a more biochemical mechanism specifically, the renal compensation, to be more specific, in reaction to this, is to increase the body's urinary excretion and the subsequent releases of more or additional hydrogen ions and HC03. That's basically an immediate kind of way of the body's way of dealing with insufficient oxygen levels and a buildup of carbon dioxide levels. That's why this response happens. And it's all in an effort, basically, of the body to try and bring it back to a standard pH level, a normal pH level, which I believe for humans is 7.4 or something like that. That is the main goal of the body at that point. Now, there are pros and cons, and by pros and cons, I mean there are risks of the body attempting to save itself in this way, and that is that it can lead to all the symptoms that were mentioned before: fatigue, sweating, shortness of breath, etc. And these are warning signs. These are conditional to this biochemical reaction of the body trying to deal with this buildup of carbon dioxide and lack of oxygen in a sudden and drastic way. So yeah, in addition to, I also want to mention, can exacerbate neuromuscular disorders such as myasthenia gravis, where the nerves simply don't stimulate the muscles. That again is caused partially, not entirely, by oxygen deprivation. So again, the key takeaways being the body's trying to balance its pH levels, and the body is trying to respond sufficiently to the feedback it's receiving of insufficient bodily ventilation. So in conclusion, that's kind of the basis of respiratory acidosis. It's a relatively straightforward condition. Not to say it's simple in its biomechanics or in its physiological effects, but it is a serious condition, and research is being made in its treatment. Currently, the best treatment is to simply, provide as much oxygen through a ventilation mask to the patient as possible. In extreme cases, intubation, such as if there's an injury to the lung, or if there is a collapsed lung, or if there's a neurological reason for the body to suddenly start shutting down its own respiratory system, where you simply cannot breathe on your own, intubation becomes necessary. That's an extreme, very extreme and sudden treatment to a very acute cause of respiratory acidosis. In the future, it's hard to say really, because this is the kind of condition where it can be so drastic and it can be so sudden, and it can be caused by a myriad of other factors, right? So there's not a lot of potential promise for more immediate and effective and less invasive treatments. But, research is underway. There are ways where, a patient would be able to, and this is from what some of the scientific literature that I've been reading, state that in the future it would be possible for it to be treated, the same way, but over a significantly shorter period of time, flooding the body with oxygen to sufficient levels, cutting the treatment time in half, essentially, and the recovery time exponentially lower. So yeah, that is a breakdown and analysis of respiratory acidosis. I hope you managed to get enough out of this presentation, and also to really take the initiative to do more research on the subject and get a better idea of respiratory acidosis and the symptoms that it can have on the human body. It's really quite a fascinating subject. I chose to cover it because I do have a little bit of personal experience with this through my own health issues. But anyways, that has been my presentation. Thank you for listening and considering what I have to say. This has been Eddie Barragon. Thank you.